Lord Peter Wimsey, Clouds of Witness by Dorothy L. Sayers. Chapter 4. And his daughter much afraid. The women also looked pale and wan. The Pilgrim's Progress. Mr. Bunter brought Parker's letter up to Lord Peter in bed on the Wednesday morning. The house was almost deserted, everyone having gone to attend the police court proceedings at Northallerton. The thing would be purely formal, of course, but it seemed only proper that the family should be fully represented. The Dowager Duchess, indeed, was there. She had promptly hastened to her son's side, and was living heroically in furnished lodgings. But the younger Duchess thought her mother-in-law more energetic than dignified. There was no knowing what she might do if left to herself. She might even give an interview to a newspaper reporter. Besides, at these moments of crisis, a wife's right place is at her husband's side. Lady Mary was ill, and nothing could be done about that, and if Peter chose to stay smoking cigarettes in his pyjamas while his only brother was undergoing public humiliation, that was only what might be expected. Peter took after his mother. How that eccentric strain had got into the family her Grace could only guess. The Dowager came of a good Hampshire family, but there was foreign blood at the roots of her family tree. Her own duty was clear, though, and she would do it. Lord Peter was awake and looked rather fagged, as though he'd been sleuthing in his sleep. Bunter wrapped him solicitously in a brilliant oriental robe and placed the tray on his knees. "Bunter, your café au lait is the one tolerable incident in this beastly place." "Thank you, my lord." "Very chilly again this morning, my lord, though not actually raining." Lord Peter frowned over the letter. "Anything in the paper, Bunter?" "Nothing urgent, my lord. A sale next week at Northbury Hall, Mr. Fleetwhite's library. A Caxton Confessio Amantis, my lord." "Well, what's the good of telling me that when we're stuck up here for God knows how long? I wish to heaven I'd stuck to books and never turned to crime. Did you send those specimens up to Lubbock?" "Yes, my lord." Dr. Lubbock was the analytical gentleman. "Must have facts, facts. When I was a small boy I always hated facts. Thought of them as nasty, hard things, all knobs, uncompromising." "Yes, my lord." "My old mother—" "Your mother, Bunter? I did not know you had one. I always imagined you were turned out ready-made, so to speak." "Ha! Excuse me, infernally rude of me. I beg your pardon, I'm sure." "Not at all, my lord. My mother lives in Kent, my lord, near Maidstone. 75, my lord, and an extremely active woman for her years, if you'll excuse my mentioning it. I was one of 7. Well, that is an invention, Bunter, for I know better. You are unique." But I interrupted you. You were going to tell me about your mother. "Well, she always says, my lord, that facts are like cows. If you look 'em in the face hard enough, they generally run away. She's a very courageous woman, my lord." Lord Peter stretched out his hand impulsively, but Mr. Bunter was too well trained to see it. He had indeed already begun to strop a razor. Lord Peter suddenly bundled out of bed with a violent jerk and sped across the landing to the bathroom. Here he revived sufficiently to lift up his voice in "Come unto these yellow sands." Thence, feeling in a Purcellish mood, he passed to "I attempt from love's sickness to fly," with much improvement of spirits that, against all custom, he ran several gallons of cold water into the bath, and sponged himself vigorously. Wherefore, after a rough toweling, he burst explosively from the bathroom, and caught his shin somewhat violently against the lid of a large oak chest, which stood at the head of the staircase. So violently, indeed, that the lid lifted with the shock, and shut down with a protesting bang. Lord Peter stopped to say something expressive, and to caress his leg softly with the palm of his hand. But then a thought struck him. He set down his towels, soap, sponge, loofah, bath-brush, and other belongings, and quietly lifted the lid of the chest. Whether, like the heroine of Northanger Abbey, he expected to find anything gruesome inside, was not apparent. It is certain that, like her, he beheld nothing more startling than sheets and counterpanes neatly folded at the bottom. Unsatisfied, he lifted the top one of these gingerly and inspected it for a few moments in the light of the staircase window. He was just returning it to its place, whistling softly the while, when a little hiss of indrawn breath caused him to look up with a start. His sister was at his elbow. He had not heard her come, but she stood there in her dressing-gown, her hands clutched together on her breast, her blue eyes dilated till they looked almost black, and her skin seemed nearly the colour of her ash-blonde hair. Wimsey stared at her over the sheet he held in his arms, and the terror in her face passed over into his, stamping them suddenly with the mysterious likeness of blood relationship. Peter's own impression was that he stared like a stuck pig for about a minute. He knew, as a matter of fact, that he had recovered himself in a fraction of a second. He dropped the sheet into the chest and stood up. "Hello, Polly, old thing. Where have you been hiding all this time? First time I've seen you. Afraid you've been having a pretty thin time of it." He put his arm round her and felt her shrink. "What's the matter? What's up, old girl? Look here, Mary. We've never seen enough of each other, but I am your brother. Are you in trouble? Can't I—" "Trouble? Why, you silly old Peter, of course I'm in trouble. Don't you know they've killed my man and put my brother in prison? Isn't that enough to be in trouble about?" Peter thought suddenly, she's talking like somebody in a blood and thunder novel. But she went on then, more naturally. "It's all right, Peter, truly. Only my head is so bad. I really don't know what I'm doing. What are you after? You made such a noise I came out. I thought it was a door banging." "Well, you'd better toddle on back to bed. You're getting all cold. Why do girls wear such mimsy little pie-jim-jams in this damn cold climate? There, don't you worry. I'll drop in on you later and we'll have a jolly good old powwow, what?" Not today, Peter. I'm going mad, I think." Sensation fiction again. "Are they trying Gerald today?" Not exactly trying. It's just formal, you know. The jolly old magistrate bird hears the charge read, and then old Murbles pops up and says, please, he wants only formal evidence given, as he has to instruct counsel. That's biggie, you know. Then they hear the evidence of arrest, and Murbles says old Gerald reserves his defence, and then that's all till the assizes. That's evidence before the grand jury. A lot of bosh. That'll be early next month, I suppose. You'll have to buck up and be fit by then." No. Couldn't I get out of it? I couldn't go through it all again. I should be sick. I'm feeling awful. No, don't come in. I don't want you. Ring the bell for Ellen. No, let go. Go away. I don't want you, Peter. Peter hesitated, a little alarmed. "Much better not, my lord, if you'll excuse me. Only produce hysterics. Very distressing for both parties and altogether unproductive of results. Better perhaps wait for the return of her Grace the Dowager." "Yes, quite right." Peter turned back to pick up his paraphernalia, but was dexterously forestalled as once again he lifted the lid of the chest and looked in. "What did you say you found on that skirt, Bunter?" "Gravel, my lord, and silver sand." "Silver sand." Behind Riddlesdale Lodge the moor stretched starkly away and upward. The heather was brown and wet, and the little streams had no colour in them. It was 6 o'clock. There was no sunset. Only a paleness had moved behind the thick sky from east to west all day. Lord Peter, trampling back after a long and fruitless search for tidings of the man with the motorcycle, voiced the dull suffering of his gregarious spirit. "I wish old Parker was here," he muttered, and squelched down a sheep-track. He was making not directly for the lodge, but for a farmhouse about 2.5 miles distant. It was known as Grider's Hole. It lay almost due north of Riddlesdale village, a lonely outpost on the edge of a moor, in a valley of fertile land between two wide swells of heather. The track wound down from the height called Wemelling Fell, skirted a vile swamp, and crossed the little river Rid about 1/2 mile before reaching the farm. Peter had small hope of hearing any news at Grider's Hole, but he was filled with a sudden determination to leave no stone unturned. Privately, however, he felt convinced that the motorcycle had come by the high road, Parker's investigations notwithstanding, and perhaps passed directly through King's Fenton without stopping or attracting attention. Still, he had said he would search the neighbourhood, and Grider's hole was in the neighbourhood. He paused to relight his pipe, then squelched steadily on. The path was marked with stout white posts at regular intervals, and presently with hurdles. The reason for this was apparent as one came to the bottom of the alley, for only a few yards on the left began the stretch of rough, reedy tussocks, with slobbering black bog between them, in which anything heavier than a water wagtail would speedily suffer change into a succession of little bubbles. Wimsey stooped for an empty sardine tin which lay horribly battered at his feet, and slung it idly into the quag. It struck the surface with a noise like a wet kiss, and vanished instantly. With the instinct that prompts one when depressed to wallow in every circumstance of gloom, Peter leaned sadly upon the hurdles, and abandoned himself to a variety of shallow considerations, upon 1, the vanity of human wishes, 2, mutability, 3, first love, 4, the decay of idealism, 5, the aftermath of the Great War, 6, birth control, and 7, the fallacy of free will. This was his Nadia, however. Realizing that his feet were cold and his stomach empty, and that he was still some miles to go, he crossed the stream on a row of slippery stepping-stones and approached the gate of the farm, which was not an ordinary 5-barred one, but solid and uncompromising. A man was leaning over it, sucking a straw. He made no attempt to move at Wimsey's approach. "Good evening," said that nobleman in a sprightly manner, laying his hand on the catch. "Chilly, ain't it?" The man made no reply, but leaned more heavily and breathed. He wore a rough coat and breeches, and his leggings were covered with manure. "Seasonable, of course, what? Good for the sheep, I dare say. Makes their wool curl, and so on." The man removed the straw and spat in the direction of Peter's right boot. "Do you lose many animals in the bog?" Peter carelessly unlatched the gate and leaned upon it in the opposite direction. "I see you have a good wall all round the house. It must be a bit dangerous in the dark, what? If you're thinking of taking a little evening stroll with a friend." The man spat again, pulled his hat over his forehead, and said briefly, "What does her want?" "Well, I thought of paying a little friendly call on Mr. The owner of the farm, that is to say. Country neighbours and all that, you see. It's a lonely kind of country, don't you see? Is he in, do you think?" "Huh. I'm glad to hear it. It's so uncommonly jolly finding all about you Yorkshire people, so kind and hospitable, what? Never mind who you are, always a seat at the fireside and that kind of thing. Excuse me, but do you know you're leaning on the gate so I can't open it? I'm sure it's a pure oversight, only you mayn't realise that just where you're standing you get the maximum of leverage, you see. What an awfully charming house this is, isn't it? All so jolly stark and grim and all the rest of it. No creepers or little rose-grown porches or anything suburban of that sort. Who lives in it?" "Mr. Grimethorpe." "No, does he now? To think of that! Just the fellow I want to see. Model farmer, what? Wherever I go throughout the length and breadth of the North Riding, I hear of Mr. Grimethorpe. Grimethorpe's butter is the best, they say. Grimethorpe's fleeces never go to pieces. Grimethorpe's pork melts on the fork. For Irish stews, take Grimethorpe's ewes. A tummy limed with Grimethorpe's beef never comes to grief, eh? Yes. It's been my life's ambition to see Mr. Grimethorpe in the flesh, and you no doubt are his sturdy henchman and right-hand man. You leap from bed before the breaking day, to milk the kine amid the scented hay. You, when the shades of evening gather deep, home from a mountain lead the mild-eyed sheep. You by the fire's red and welcoming blaze, tell your sweet infants tales of olden days. A wonderful life. You're a trifle monotonous, perhaps, in the winter. Allow me to clasp your honest hand." Whether the man was moved by this lyric outburst, or whether the failing light was not too dim to strike a pale sheen from the metal in Lord Peter's palm, At any rate, he moved a trifle back from the gate. "Thanks awfully, Albine," said Peter, stepping briskly past him. "I take it I shall find Mr. Grimethorpe in the house?" The man said nothing till Whimsy had proceeded about a dozen yards up the flagged path. Then he hailed him, but without turning round. "Master?" "Yes, old thing," said Peter affably, returning. "Happen he'll set the dog on thy?" "You don't say so. The faithful hound welcomes the return of a prodigal. Scene of family rejoicing. My own long-lost boy, sobs and speeches, beer all round for the delighted tenantry. Glees by the old fireside, till the rafters ring and all the smoked hams tumble down to join in the revelry. Good night, sweet prince, until the cows come home and the dogs eat Jezebel in the portion of Jezreel, when the hounds of spring are on the winter's traces. I suppose they will have finished tea." As Lord Peter approached the door of the farm, his spirits rose. He enjoyed paying this kind of visit. Although he had taken to detecting, he might, with another conscience or constitution, have taken to Indian hemp for its exhilarating properties. At a moment when life seemed dust and ashes, he had not primarily the detective temperament. He expected next to nothing from inquiries at Grider's Hole, and if he had, he might probably have extracted all the information he wanted by a judicious display of treasury notes to the glum man at the gate. Peter would in all likelihood have done so. He was paid to detect and do nothing else, and neither his natural gifts nor his education at Barrow-in-Furness Grammar School prompted him to stray into side-tracks at the beck of an ill-regulated imagination. But to Lord Peter the world presented itself as an entertaining labyrinth of side issues. He was a respectable scholar in 5 or 6 languages, a musician of some skill and more understanding, something of an expert in toxicology, a collector of rare editions, an entertaining man about town, and a common sensationalist. He had been seen at 12:30 on a Sunday morning walking in Hyde Park in a top hat and frock coat, reading the news of the world. His passion for the unexplored led him to hunt up obscure pamphlets in the British Museum, to unravel the emotional history of income tax collectors, and to find out where his own drains led to. In this case, the fascinating problem of a Yorkshire farmer who habitually set the dogs on casual visitors imperatively demanded investigation in a personal interview. The result was unexpected. His first summons was unheeded, and he knocked again. This time there was a movement, and a surly male voice called out, "Well, let him in then! Dang and dang thee!" emphasized by the sound of something falling or thrown across the room. The door was opened unexpectedly by a little girl of about 7, very dark and pretty, and rubbing her arm as though the missile had caught her there. She stood defensively blocking the threshold, till the same voice growled impatiently, "Well, who is it?" "Good evening," said Whimsy, removing his hat. "I hope you'll excuse me dropping in like this. I'm living at Riddlesdale Lodge." "What of it?" Above the child's head, Whimsy saw the outline of a big, thick-set man smoking in the ingle nook of an immense fireplace. There was no light but the fireplace, for the window was small and dusk had already fallen. It seemed to be a large room, but with a high oak settle on the farther side of the chimney, which ran out across it, leaving a cavern of impenetrable darkness beyond. "May I come in?" "You must. Shut door, ask what they're staring at. Go to their mother and bid her mend their manners for thee." This seemed a case of a pot lecturing the kettle on cleanliness, but the child vanished hurriedly into the blackness behind the settle, and Peter walked in. "Are you Mr. Grimethorpe?" "Well, if I am. I've no call to be ashamed of my name." "Rather not, nor of your farm. Delightful place, what? Oh, my name's Whimsy, by the way. Lord Peter Whimsy, in fact, Duke of Denver's brother. I'm sure I hate interrupting you. You must be busy with the sheep and all that. But I thought you wouldn't mind if I just ran over in a neighbourly way, this being a lonely sort of country, ain't it? I like to know the people next door and all that sort of thing. I'm used to London, you see. People live pretty thick on the ground there. I suppose very few strangers ever pass this way." "None." "Well, perhaps it's as well. Makes one appreciate one's home circle more, what?" often think one sees too many strangers in town. Nothing like one's family when all's said and done. Cosy, don't you know? You're a married man, Mr. Grimethorpe."
"What the hell's it to do with you?"
The farmer rounded on him with such ferocity that Whimsy looked about quite nervously for the dogs before mentioned. "Oh, nothing. Only I thought that charming little girl might be yours."
"And if I thought she weren't, I'd strangle the bitch and her mother together. What's you got to say to that?"
As a matter of fact, the remark, considered as a conversational formula, seemed to leave so much to be desired that Whimsy's natural loquacity suffered a severe check. He fell back, however, on the usual resource of the male, and offered Mr. Grimethorpe a cigar, thinking to himself as he did so, "What a hell of a life a woman must lead." The farmer declined the cigar with a single word, and was silent. Whimsy lit a cigarette for himself, and became meditative, watching his companion, who was a man of about 45, apparently rough, harsh, and weather-beaten, with great ridgy shoulders and short, thick thighs, a bull-terrier with a bad temper. Deciding that delicate hints would be wasted on such an organism, Whimsy adopted a franker method. "To tell the truth, Mr. Grimethorpe, I didn't blow in without any excuse at all. Always best to provide oneself with an excuse for a call, what? Though it's so perfectly delightful to see you, no excuse might appear necessary. But fact is, I'm looking for a young man, an acquaintance of mine, who said he'd be roaming about this neighbourhood some time or other about now. Only I'm afraid to say I've missed him. You see, I've only just got over from Corsica. Interesting country and all that, Mr. Grimethorpe, but a trifle out of the way. And from what my friend said, I think he must have turned up here about a week ago and found me out. Just my luck. But he didn't leave his card, so I can't be quite sure, you see. You didn't happen to come across him by any chance? Tall fellow with big feet on a motorcycle and a sidecar. I thought he might have come rooting about here. Hello, do you know him?" The farmer's face had become swollen and almost black with rage.
"What day ceased thou?"
"Well, I should think last Wednesday night or Thursday morning." Peter laid a hand on his heavy Malacca cane.
"I knew it. I knew it. The slut! And all those damned women with their dirty ways. The tyke was a friend of thine. Well, I were at Stapley Wednesday and Thursday, but knew that, didn't you? And so did that friend of yours, didn't he, eh? And if I hadn't, it'd have been the worse for him. He'd have been in Peter's pot if I'd have caught him. And that's where thou'll be, the sen, in a minute, blast thee! And if I find you sneaking here again, I'll blast every bone in yours body and send you there to look for him."
And with these surprising words, he made for Peter's throat like a bulldog. "That won't do," said Peter, disengaging himself with an ease which astonished his opponent, and catching his wrist in a grip of mysterious and excruciating agony. "It isn't wise, you know. You might murder a fellow like that. Nasty business, murder. Coroner's inquest and all that sort of thing. Counsel for the prosecution asking all sorts of inquisitive questions, and a fellow putting a string round your neck afterwards. Besides, your method is a bit primitive." "Stand still, you fool, or you'll break your arm." "Right. Feeling better? That's right. Now sit down. You'll get into trouble one of these days, behaving like that when you're asked a civil question."
"Get out of this house."
"Certainly. I have to thank you for a very entertaining evening, Mr. Grimethorpe. I'm sorry you can give me no news of my friend." Mr. Grimethorpe sprang up again with a blasphemous ejaculation, and made for the door, shouting, "Jabez! Jabez!" Lord Peter stared after him a moment, and then stared round the room. "Something fishy here. Fellow knows something. Murderous sort of brute. I wonder." He peered round the settle, came face to face with a woman, a dim patch of whiteness in the thick shadow. "You," she said in a low, hoarse gasp. You're mad to come here. Quick, quick, he's gone for the dogs." She placed her 2 hands on his breast, thrusting him urgently back. Then, as the firelight fell upon his face, she uttered a stifled shriek and stood petrified, a Medusa head of terror. Medusa was beautiful, says the tale, and so was this woman. A broad white forehead and amassed dusky hair, black eyes glowing under straight brows, a wide passionate mouth, a shape so wonderful that even in that strenuous moment 16 generations of feudal privilege stirred in Lord Peter's blood. His hands closed over hers instinctively, but she pulled herself hurriedly away and shrank back. "Madam," said Wimsey, recovering himself, "I don't quite—" 1,000 questions surged up in his mind, but before he could frame them, a long yell and then another came from the back of the house. "Run! Run! The dogs! Oh, my God, what's going to become of me? Go if you don't want to see me killed! Go! Have pity! Oh, look here, can't I stay and protect? You can stay and murder me! Go!" Peter cast public school tradition to the winds, caught up his stick, and went. The brutes were at his heels as he fled. He struck the foremost with his stick, and it dropped back, snarling. The man was still leaning on the gate, and Grimethorpe's hoarse voice was heard shouting to him to seize the fugitive. Peter closed with him. There was a scuffle of dogs and men, and suddenly Peter found himself thrown bodily over the gate. As he picked himself up and ran, he heard the farmer cursing the man, and the man retorting that he couldn't help it. Then the woman's voice, uplifted in a frightened wail. He glanced over his shoulder. The man and the woman and a second man who had now joined the party were beating the dogs back and seemed to be persuading Grimethorpe not to let them through. The farmer turned moodily away, and the second man called the dogs off, with much whip-cracking and noise. The woman said something, and her husband turned furiously upon her and struck her to the ground. Peter made a movement to go back, but a strong conviction that he could only make matters worse for her arrested him. He stood still and waited till she'd picked herself up and gone in, wiping the blood and dirt from her face with her shawl. The farmer looked round, shook his fist at him, and followed her into the house. Jabez collected the dogs and drove them back, and Peter's friend returned to lean over the gate. Peter waited till the door had closed upon Mr. and Mrs. Grimethorpe. Then he pulled out his handkerchief and in the half-darkness signalled cautiously to the man, who slipped through the gate and came slowly down to him. "Thanks very much," said Wimsey, putting money into his hand. "I'm afraid I've done unintentional mischief." The man looked at the money and at him. "'Tis the master's way with them as comes to look at missus. Thou's best keep away if be so wanting to have her blood on your head. See here, did you by any chance meet a young man with a motorcycle wandering round here last Wednesday or thereabouts?" "Wednesday? 'Twould be the day the master went to Stapley." "I seed nowt." "All right. If you find anybody who did, let me know. Here's my name, and I'm staying at Riddlesdale Lodge. Good night. Many thanks." The man took the card from him and slouched back without a word of farewell. Lord Peter walked slowly, his coat collar turned up and his hat pulled over his eyes. This cinematographic episode had troubled his logical faculty. With an effort he sorted out his ideas and arranged them in some kind of order. First item. Mr. Grimethorpe, a gentleman who will stick at nothing. Hefty, unamiable, inhospitable. Dominant characteristic, jealousy of his very astonishing wife. Was at Stapley last Wednesday and Thursday buying machinery. Helpful gentleman at gate corroborates this, by the way. So that, at this stage of the proceedings, one may allow it to be a sound alibi. Did not, therefore, see our mysterious friend with the sidecar, if he was there, but is disposed to think he was there, and has very little doubt about what he came for, which raises an interesting point. Why the sidecar? Awkward thing to tour about with. Very good. But if our friend came after Mrs. G, he obviously didn't take her. Good again. The second item, Mrs. Grimethorpe. Very singular item, by Jove. He paused meditatively to reconstruct a thrilling moment. Let us admit at once that if number 10 came for the purpose suspected, he had every excuse for it. Well, Mrs. G goes in terror of her husband, who thinks nothing of knocking her down on suspicion. I wish to God I would have only made things worse. Only thing you can do for the wife of a brute like that is to keep away from her. Hope there won't be murder done. One's enough at a time. Where was I? Yes, well, Mrs. Grimethorpe knows something, and she knows somebody. She took me for somebody who had every reason for not coming to Grider's Hole. Where was she, I wonder, while I was talking to Grimethorpe? She wasn't in the room. Perhaps the child warned her. No, that won't wash. I told the child who I was. Wait, no, a minute. I see a light, do I? She looked out of a window and saw a bloke in an aged Burberry. Number 10 is a bloke in an aged Burberry. Now let's suppose for a moment she takes me for number 10. What does she do? She sensibly keeps out of the way. Can't think why I'm such a fool as to turn up. Then when Grimethorpe runs out shouting for the kennelman, she nips down with her life in her hands to warn me. Me, her, well, shall we say boldly, her lover? To get away. She finds it isn't her lover, but only a gaping ass of, I fear, a very coming-on disposition. New compromising position. She tells the ass to save himself and herself by clearing out. Ass clears, not too gracefully. The next instalment of this enthralling drama will be shown in this theatre. When? I'd jolly well like to know. He tramped on for some time. All the same, all this throws no light on what number 10 was doing at Riddlesdale Lodge. At the end of his walk he had reached no conclusion. Whatever happens, and if it can be done without danger to her life, I must see Mrs. Grimethorpe again.